sure they'll tell us. And this is all good. One mic for this one. We won't be switching it up. Good. All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Monday of Baltimore Innovation Week. My name is Margaret Rose-Falzon. I am currently the COO of Squadra Ventures, which is an early-stage venture fund here based in Baltimore City that focuses on cyber and national security companies. Fortunately, I won't be talking about that to you right now, maybe a different day. I'll come back on Friday for the investor and VC panel. But today I'm happy to be here with our partners at Innovation Works to really bring back an amazing event from the 2015 Baltimore Innovation Week archives, FailFest. Everyone's heard the stats that 90% of entrepreneurs fail, 10% of companies fail within the first year. But the big stat that people like to overlook in the story of their success is that everyone went through failures to get where they are today. So regardless of your role as a new company, a consulting firm, an entrepreneur, a early team member, a developer, it doesn't matter. Everyone's had some part of their journey where they've learned something along the way that's totally transformed how they think about what they do now. So in this session, you're going to hear Ignite style from somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes to up to 7 minutes from a variety of different entrepreneurs and business people from the business community right here in Baltimore to tell you their story of how they learned from a failure. And so to get us started, we have Rob Ray, who is the founder of Whitebox.
Thank you very much for having me here. So I'm going to start out here with this slide. We'll start out with a big failure. So in April of 2010, my net worth was negative $550,000, which was pretty terrible. It was like a big, deep pain in my gut. It was horrible for my family, horrible for my health. But nonetheless, here I was, and I had to go do something about it. Just fast forward to today, I was able to dig myself out of the hole. I founded a company called Whitebox 3 years later, August of 2013, which got many millions of venture capital dollars, and we have buildings in 3 states and hundreds of employees. But what Whitebox does is, just so you know, for some context, is we do e-commerce for brands. And so we do both the digital advertising. We have technology and systems that does the digital advertising for brands. We help brands sell more stuff more efficiently. And then we also have a network of warehouses where we ship those orders for brands. But anyhow, in April of 2010, negative $550,000, and I made a lot of mistakes. But I think one of the things that I've tried to do is look at every one of these failures as an opportunity to learn. So here's how I got there. You might have heard that you should fail fast. I heard that lesson early in high school, so I immediately went and failed my math and my English classes, but I don't think that's what people had in mind. Anyhow, I worked on computers at night and slept in my classes during the day, which let me go start my first company, Innovative Technology, when I got out of high school in 1996. That company, I made all sorts of mistakes. I hired the wrong people. I didn't fire them fast enough. I didn't know how to read a profit and loss statement or a balance sheet. I didn't even pay my taxes properly, so that was a big mess that I had to dig myself out of. But I dug myself out of those mistakes and started MP3 Car, which is my second company. That started in the late 90s, early 2000s, and the need we were solving there was the only way to get digital audio in the car at that time was to put a full desktop PC in the car. So we had a big online community of people that were putting computers in their cars. And we made an e-commerce store, which is how I got my e-commerce roots, to help sell them these hard-to-find parts. That was moving along great, and so I thought, let's shovel in some more money. So I mortgaged my house. I took some friends and family money. I personally guaranteed all of this debt. And I decided to keep growing MP3 Car. And I thought, well, we need some software for the car. So without having a business plan, without having a financial model, without having any investor materials, I took all of my own unsupervised money and shoveled it into this company, which was fun. I was burning a lot of cash. We got a lot of press. We were in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times, and lots of press. And Intel actually even took one of our cars out on stage. But because we had no strategy, that ultimately was a very, very bad failure. Our team wasn't aligned. We didn't have a product plan. We didn't have a financial model. So that failed. But fortunately, I found a client that was launching a satellite. So I got to go down to Florida to go see a satellite launch. But they agreed to pay us $1 million. They used the software that I had built to be the interface for their satellite. But because of all of these issues, team alignment, and most importantly, this client, right after we had finished the project, declared bankruptcy. And I was not able to get paid for all of this work that I'd done. So that's how I ended up with this massive amount of negative net worth. So what do you do when you have negative $550,000 of net worth? You go decide to take an around the world trip. So I took all of my frequent flyer miles that I had and booked an around the world ticket. I think I visited maybe 20 or 30 countries on that trip. And then I came back and I'm ready to declare bankruptcy when I met with some of the mentors here at the ETC and said, don't do this. It's just as much work to go declare bankruptcy because that's a big, nasty mess and you're never going to forgive yourself for it and it's going to stick with you forever. So go pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go solve this problem. So I went back to my e-commerce roots, turned around MP3 car. We grew from $1 million to $5 million in revenue. We had 8% gross margins at the time. So the only way for us to do this was to build a bunch of software and systems to dig ourselves out of that hole. And so over a period of several years, we did that. And that actually became the basis for Whitebox, which I was talking about at the beginning of our slides here. But that was a brutal route to get there. So what did I learn? I think a couple things. We say 90% of these of ventures fail. So build yourself an awesome support team. Get a coach, get some advisors, get a therapist. Maybe get all three of those things. But you need to do everything in your power to stack the odds in your favor because failure is such a likely outcome. I think the other thing that I did is I shoveled a lot of my own money in without having investor materials and without getting any advisory support. So, that includes building your financial models, investor materials, competitive research, anything that you would want to do to go get an outside investor. Make sure you do yourself the favor of doing that before you shovel in your own dollars. I think the other thing is I was afraid when I was building the software for the car, I was afraid that someone was going to steal my idea, so I kept a lot of my cards close to my chest. And because I did that, I got really lousy advice from my advisors because they didn't have all of the information. So find some advisors you trust, show them your whole deck, everything and then some. Because if I had have done that, I would have probably not made as many mistakes as I did. And then I think, I think one thing that I could have done a lot better when I grew Whitebox was focused a lot more on my health and build resiliency. So how do you build personal resiliency? I think that's so overlooked. And if you don't take care of yourself, you can't go take care of your team. You can't build a good company. And so I share this graph. This is actually a graph of my weight overlaid with some various different stress events that were happening at the time. So right now I'm about 205 pounds, which is what I was when I started Whitebox in 2013. But at the thick of things, I got up to about 250 pounds. And I bring that up mainly because it was just a marker for my well-being. And I think I wasn't looking after my diet. I wasn't sleeping enough. And I think I got in the habit of going to happy hours and having 2 or 3 drinks here and there. And then you get to the point where you're not sleeping well, your cortisol level goes up. So I guess my main point of this is, like when they tell you when you're on the airplane that you've got to take care of your own oxygen mask first, I think that's super true with being an entrepreneur. So make sure you do that. And thank you so much for having me here. And I'll be around later if you have any questions. Sure.
Round of applause for Rob. I have often joked, but not joked in all seriousness. People often talk about the freshman 15. They neglect to tell you about the founders 35 when you decide to start a business. So it's a good point to keep in mind. And with that, keeping on the health-related theme for a minute, I'd like to invite Anna Rodney to the stage, who's the founder of Mom Cares.
Greetings, everyone. Hello. All right. I grew up in a Southern Caribbean house. So when you come in the house, you got to speak. So let's do that. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anna Rodney, and I am the Executive Director of Mom Cares. Mom Cares is an organization that supports Black women in particular who are navigating a high-risk pregnancy and or NICU involvement after a traumatic birth outcome. This year, we are on pace, hopefully, fingers crossed, to bring in upwards of $600,000. We were founded in 2017, with a staff of 7. I am a Baltimore Homecoming awardee. I am an Innovation Works Fellow. I was named Baltimore Game Changer. All of these things, all to say that I'm hot stuff. But I'm not here to talk about how hot I am. We can talk about that later. We're here to talk about a failure. So I want to start off with a personal failure and then end with a professional failure. So in 2019, after a rebound with a friend I've been friends with for 10 years, I found myself pregnant and alone. And again, in my very Trinidadian Catholic family, that was a huge failure. But because of that, I had a little boy who is now 7 going on 8, who ended up in the NICU. And while we were in the NICU, I had all types of terrible, horrible experiences that led me to sit down and create Mom Cares. So without me leaning into and taking on that mistake, quote unquote, that failure, quote unquote, I would not be here living my wildest dreams, ridiculously happy, and making change for the city and for your families, for families throughout the city. So I want to just encourage you to, when you fall on your face, whether it be personal or professional, to look at what the actual lesson is and if you can bring it out. Because again, people who would have seen me would have been like, well, actually they did, you ruined your life. You're never going to be anything. You messed up. I can't believe it. And now I got people calling me, asking me for money. No thanks. Remember, I failed. That was a joke. I go to therapy. It's okay. So when trying to decide how I was going to talk about a failure, a business failure, I didn't want to come up and tell you guys that I used to fail so bad and now I am so far beyond that and you guys just got to get like me and just not fail at the beginning and never fail again, because that is not true. If you're running a business or running an organization, if you don't fail at least once a day, if you don't feel like you're failing all the time, you're probably doing something a little wrong. You cannot do everything, and so there's always going to be something that is undone. There's always going to be something that needs a little bit more tweaking, but thankfully, if you take care of yourself, right, self-resiliency, you'll be here long enough to make sure that all of the things that you want to do and all of the ways you want them to be will be that. And so I'm going to talk to you guys about a current/recent failure. We provide service to mothers here in Baltimore City. We do we do baby care essential deliveries to our families once a month. We are connecting families to mental health care. We're doing direct service doula care work, and a number of different things. One of the things that we found in our work with our families, because we were listening to our families, is that they needed food. Inflation is going crazy. They needed support with food. And so we had a connection to the Maryland Food Bank, and I was invited to write a proposal, write an application, and I knew pretty much that I was going to get it. And so in April, we got the email, hey, yay, you've been accepted. You need to do A, B, and C. And so without talking to my team or putting it on my calendar, because why? I decided, you guys, I am dropping these jewels here. You guys aren't laughing or anything. It's fine. So without doing those things, I decided I was going to take on this project without having a staff member that I knew was going to be able to use the project. I was going to just find some money because money likes me. So we'll get the project and then we'll bring someone on to deal with it in the meantime. We also had to let go of a staff member. And April is my birthday, woo, for the Aries, my youngest birthday, and also Black Maternal Health Week. So I was already overloaded, I was already tired and supremely distracted. And so it wasn't until May, during the deadline, the day of the deadline, I decided I've been working really, really hard. I'm going to take my kids to the park, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to finish the application requirements before the deadline, because that's what rock stars do. Until I sat down to my computer after dinner and realized that the deadline was the day before. My kids were happy that they had some time with mommy. They had lasagna that night, I will never forget. But my heart was in my feet. Because my failures at this point are not just mine. They do not just belong to me. They do not just belong to my staff. They belong to an entire community of women and families that trust me to listen to them and to react to them in the way that they're asking us to do. And because I decided that I was tired and burnt out and wanted to go play on the swings with my son, and I was used to working the midnight oil, I thought I had time to prioritize myself. And I didn't, because I hadn't before, right? And so I said I adopted, because the thing in grief is acceptance. One of those places, I called my friend and I screamed expletives at myself on the phone. And I ran around the house screaming, and my kids were scared and didn't know what's going on. And then after that, acceptance came in, and I said, what's for me is for me. And I'm going to apply again over the summer when the application opens. And I did. And 2 weeks ago, we got a rejection letter. We were still rejected for getting families our food. And what I could have done then was say, well, you know what? I can't do it. They're going to have to find something else. I'm overloaded. Instead, I dug deep into the partnerships that we had. I showed up at events like this and told people what I needed. I was invited to different events and just sat down and told people what I needed. And we, as of last week, have been invited to enjoy Thanksgiving with an area organization who has committed to getting our families food once a month. Come on, y'all. It's Monday. And so what this means is that, number one, you need to make sure that you know what is on your plate. You need to make sure that you are reaching out for help. My friend that came before us mentioned holding your cards to your chest. I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that because there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people out there that want to kind of co-opt what you're doing, right? Especially people of color. And so you need to make sure that you have trusted people around you that you can ask for help, and they don't take advantage of that. They actually help, right? But again, it's up to you to make sure that you know what you are capable of and that you can delegate when you're not capable of it. Because it was not a mistake to take my children to the park. It was a mistake to think that I could do everything by myself and wait until the last minute. Also, you should use your calendar and a project management tool if you have one. But I think that the most important things that I've learned from this most recent failure and all of the other failures that I've had in my life is that the world is not over when you fail, unless you decide it to be over. And then I like everybody in this room, so I hope that never happens. But the world keeps going, which means you have another opportunity and another chance. The only one that's holding you back from making an improvement on something that you wanted to do is yourself. And there are infinite possibilities that can land you way further than you could ever imagine if you just open yourself up and let yourself get dirty. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. In a brief intermission before I introduce our next speaker, I think one of the things that what was really behind wanting to put this event on and bring these people together is because one of the things you're hearing through this is this real value of the opportunity for mentorship, coaching, advice, a sounding board, a friend, these other people that we can talk to. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of some of the work that I get to spend time with Jay doing is really helping build out this more, and John Springer, who's just joined us as well, more robust ecosystem of early stage entrepreneur mentorship, advice, and support, and making that a place that we can really all get those kind of resources. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jay Nwachu, the CEO of Innovation Works.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to sit down for this one. Sorry, it's been a long day. And I'm going to set my iPad here so I don't ramble in front of you guys. Just bear with me for a second. This is my props. Good afternoon. All right. So I'm going to look down here every once in a while. Seriously, I'm going to read my notes because my brain is all over the place right now. That said, failure. Let's talk about that. All weekend, I was reflecting on what failures I had dealt with my entire life, and I was really trying to find the one that was big enough, like the massive failure to share with you all today. And lo and behold, I could not come up with one. Not because I'm perfect, not because I don't fail, but because, over time, if you are a high achiever, you've found ways to reorient your failures into lessons learned, right? And I found myself just doing that over and over and over and over again. And quite frankly, I was almost paralyzed from overanalysis. Not really, that's an exaggeration, but I really was getting tired at some point, to the point where I started actually committing some micro failures while trying to think about the massive failure, like ignoring my children, for example, because I got distracted, or almost burning something on the stove because I was distracted trying to think about a massive failure. And then at one point, I started asking myself, why are you having a challenge with this, really? And it just came down to, once again, my orientation around failure. The way I think about failure is this. It's like deciding to run the Charleston 12-miler, going out running practice every day. In my mind, I'm going to finish this thing at like 8 miles per hour. It's going to be great. I'm 8 miles per minute average. It's going to be great. And then I get out there and I start running. And it's like, whoa, 13 miles a minute. That's not what you planned for. And then I just tell myself this story. You remember you pulled like the hammy almost once on that one corner, and then there were hills, and you start telling, and I stopped to enjoy the city a little bit because I always drive through this part of the city but never walk. So let me just enjoy it. Deep down inside, I really, really wanted to go fast. But I've just told myself to learn all these things along the way, so it's not really a failure anymore, right? Because I learned from it. That's how I think about it, right? And then what do I do next? Like every other responsible adult, I Googled what is failure to help me out. And what I saw was failure is either a lack of success at something you tried at, or the inability to meet an expectation. The second part, the inability to meet an expectation. That's when I fell apart. I was like, oh yeah, failures are now pouring in now because the inability to meet an expectation is no longer about me. It's about expectations other people had of me, spoken or unspoken, all right? And now I had plenty of examples at this point, and they were just running through my head. And then I realized at that point that I spent a lot of time failingly telling myself that I don't fail often because, it's the way I captured it. So then I finally found one example. And this is back in 2020. As we mentioned, Innovation Works to support social entrepreneurs and invest in them through impact investing. In 2020, if you're a Baltimore person, breaking news is not, we're just used to breaking news at this point. It's like every other week, there's something else happening. And this time around, there was breaking news from City Hall. And one of the individuals that we had invested in, this breaking news surely had to impact their work, right? It's Friday, it's 3 p.m., somebody was trying to bury the news over the weekend. It didn't happen because I saw it, and I started panicking. One of our portfolio companies, something's going to happen because something happened at City Hall. I tend to move 20 miles a minute because I'm used to operating in crisis mode. It's the Nigerian in me, I think. I'm not sure if that's what it is. So, of course, the first thing I do is I'm trying to make lunch. I'm trying to do this thing. It's 3 p.m. on a Friday. Now I'm going to text all the stakeholders to make sure they saw the same news. Baltimore wasn't really going to fall apart over the weekend. Let's be very clear about that. The news wasn't really that big. But for me, the action-oriented person who just wants to be the first one to know, the first one to react, and the first one to get out the gate, I decided I was going to start texting stakeholders, including the entrepreneur that it impacted, and then a board member over here to make sure they saw that I saw the news, to make sure that they knew I was on top of it. And in an effort to take a shortcut and relay the message that I was having with the entrepreneur, I screenshotted the entrepreneur's chat with me to send it to the board member so I don't have to re-explain what I talked about with the entrepreneur. Guess who I sent the screenshot to? The entrepreneur, yes, who got a prize. Now, this is an entrepreneur that I've been building a relationship with for like 2 years, right? Most entrepreneurs we work with, phone call is as good as we get every once in a while, not text messages on a Friday at 3 p.m. This is now personal at this point. This is a friend. And the idea of your friend sending you a screenshot of your own message interaction with them and then attempt to send it to someone else was really a violation of trust. I try to explain it away. You know, it's Friday afternoon. I'm tired. It's been a long week. I was just trying to shortcut. I'm sorry. Wasn't working. All I got was silence. Imagine getting silence from someone you care deeply about. That was personally embarrassing for me. And of course, Mr. Reorient Failure over here, seriously, this person is just taking it way too seriously, right? Screenshotting is something we do, right? Like, I'm an elder millennial. I think that's something we do and accept now. We just, that's what we do. Try to justify myself. It was not working at all. And what did I do? Just give space and time. It took about 6 months, quite frankly, of just like minimal conversation over time. You doing okay? Yep. You doing okay? Yep. Next month, just checking in. You okay? I saw the article about you. Yep, I'm fine. Okay, good luck. Month after month after month after month. Eventually, we cracked the code. I don't know what happened. It was just a nice sunny day. Hey, you want to chat? Sure. Got on the phone. I apologized deeply over and over and over again. And we were good. And that was it. A few lessons from that for me. One is that we live in a society where people expect us to be on all the time, right? And in an effort to be on all the time, we feel like we have to respond to everything right away. Everything becomes a crisis. When you are in a relationship business, because yes, we're technical assistants and investing and all that jazz. At the end of the day, the core of it all is relationships. The core, everything we try to do for Baltimore City is relationships. And relationships moves at the speed of trust. And when I tried to move too fast, I broke that trust. And then it took a while to regain it. I would love to tell you that I've slowed down since then. That will be a lie. I've not. Do I still screenshot messages? Is that what it calls? Is that a verb? I don't know what it is. Only if it's like somebody I know would not be mad at it, right? Like my wife or someone, right? Am I still making mistakes every once in a while? Yes. What I've learned, though, is to be patient with myself, first of all, and give myself grace. And then learn to be patient with the people I'm in a relationship with. Because at the end of the day, that's all we got is time. Because if we just keep moving so fast, we might break things we don't intend to break. That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Jay. I love the spectrum of lessons that we get in these conversations. Even a tiny moment turns into something that we really changes the way we think about something we've done or what we do. And I definitely not that I'm a big screenshotter, I'm a phone call person, but I'm definitely going to think twice before the next time, and I think we all should. But on that note, so I'd like to invite Chip Gaskins to the stage, who's the CFO of Onyx Point, to share a story from across his career.
Well, I'm wholly unprepared. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation or barely even notes, but I will share with you what I have as far as failures in my life, failures in my investing life. I don't come to you probably as much of an entrepreneur as you guys probably are used to seeing or are yourself. I have been one for 5 or 6 years of my life that I can tell you about. And going back to Rob, wherever I was at Intel Capital when I think your company came through to pitch us in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think I remember seeing your pitch. So I started my career at Intel Capital in Silicon Valley in the late 90s, and would not even have brought that up if it were not for someone that actually had a deal come through that gauntlet. So, but not long after that, you guys are probably all too young to remember, the entire .com bust happened, and everyone that thought they were going to be able to become the next Elon Musk and build spaceships and fly to the moon, all of a sudden didn't have any money, and all of us were out of jobs. It was a humbling experience for a young investor at the time. But through that process, I've been doing equity investing both at a venture capital level and at a private equity level for pretty much my entire career. I've had investments in completely disparate set of industries, from trucking to ship piracy around the southern tip of Africa, to in-home nursing, to you name it. And through that process, about 10 years ago, my kids were getting older, and of course, love entrepreneurship, love investing. I was trying to get my kids to learn it as much, and also get them a summer job. I took a flyer and bought a pet business. The pet industry in our country is a $60 billion industry, and I bought a dog walking service and a grooming and boarding service for pets. Extremely small, not what I would normally be buying into. Something more, I would say, as a hobby for myself, and more to teach my kids on how to be entrepreneurs and capitalists, and provide and work hard and do something. They love dogs, and it was going to be something that they were going to do during the summer and learn from it during the process. During that process, as venture capitalists do and private equity professionals do, you're supposed to do extremely deep due diligence. And through that process, I did not do my job as both dad and investor very well, and ended up looking the other way on a few things and finding out I bought a company that was committing basically tax fraud. And there was a completely different set of books, there was a completely different bank, and a completely different group of employees. And so the P&L was not the P&L of the actual company. And about 6 months into it, I realized that I had borrowed a little bit of money from a bank to do this, and all in the hopes of teaching my kids on this is America, this is capitalism, this is what you do. That the books were not the books, and I ultimately, there's no we, it was me, I ultimately had to put the company into bankruptcy. And through that process, my kids learned what bankruptcy was, and learned what it meant to think you had a good thesis on something, and think you had a good idea, and doing it for all the right reasons, but realize that everything that people tell you is not always true. So luckily for all of us, as we talk about failure, we live in the best country in the world about this topic. Other countries in the world don't celebrate failure like we do. We literally, as a country, to talk about an old 1990s Harvard Business School term, our sustainable competitive advantage as a country is that we celebrate failure. In many countries in the world, if you fail, you're done. Your career's done. No one will touch you. In America, if you fail, there are many venture capital firms out there that look at that as part of the maturation process of learning how to live through adversity. And matter of fact, look at that as a check mark. Even if you have a less superior business model, if you're a management team or an individual that has gone through that type of adversity and had to lay people off or figure out how to do the right thing in a hard time, that's a management team that people want to back, because you've had to live through laying your best friend off or laying your business partner off or them laying you off. And so we live in a society and a capitalistic, country that looks at that as a check mark for upside. And our capital markets are built to sustain that. And venture capital firms realize that the 90% that fail are the 90% that fail. And you try to isolate and find the folks that that are not going to necessarily fail because they know how to pivot, and overused term, find the way not to be in that situation. So some of the learnings out of it: if someone's willing to commit fraud, it's pretty hard, no matter how great your lawyers are, your accountants are, your forensic accountants are, it's pretty hard to find. And do business with people that you trust. It's a cliche. It's hard to figure out. It's where the EQ has to meet the IQ. Do business with people you trust. Another thing is, it's hard to find these black swan events, because I ultimately had to close the business down because of COVID. It was a little side project I was working on. I wasn't paying much attention to it, but guess what happens when everyone works from home? No one has to walk their dog anymore. So literally, if you would have walked up to me on the street when I bought the company and said, you need to worry about Amazon doing this or another company doing that, I would have said, no, that's fair. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I need to look around that corner. If you would have told me that everyone was going to be working from home in 12 months, I would have said, you have rocks in your head. What happened? 12 months later, everyone was working from home. So these black swan events are really hard to figure out. And, they happen, and being able to bob and weave and try to think about those as much as you can is hard to do sometimes. But yeah, that's what I got. Hopefully we're good.
All right, so one of the things that's unique about some of the people who have joined us today, including Chip, is we have, I think in these kind of events, people are excited about hearing from VCs or hearing the story of that. And so even like on Friday, like I already soft pitched myself, I'll be on a panel again. You can hear from me on this mic twice. There's the side of how do you let people know and understand really this story of how you're getting there. And what I really appreciate so with Chip's story, and then in a minute we'll hear from John Timken as well, those lessons that happen on the other side, especially from the investor side, you never get to hear them. So I hope everyone's kind of taking that little gem that you have two people today on the stage who are sharing, and actually really three with Jay as well, from sitting in the investor seat, actually saying what happened on the other side. So with that, I'd like to invite John Timken to the stage, who I'm lucky enough to work with every day because he is the CFO of Squadra Ventures.
Thanks, Margaret. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So I guess I'll sit. So as Margaret mentioned, I'm John Timken, newly hired CFO at Squadra Ventures. I was previously at Camden Partners here in town. Grew up in Connecticut, went to college down here, got into the business. But I also do some side investing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the relationships you have with your friends and how you're going to invest and you're going to get investments from your friends, and it can go sideways, and it did for me. So 6 years ago, I got a call from a friend of mine. Said, John, I got this really neat software company I think you would like. This is really exciting. Take a look. So I said, all right, send me the deck. So I go over the deck. Deck looks great. We meet the CEO. The CEO is actually my buddy's friend from college, and we start talking. And we get into the weeds on development, product fit, all the good stuff. And I said, all right, well, how much money are you trying to raise? He said, $2 million. Okay. And we went through a whole diligence process around fit, timing, structure, everything from soup to nuts around structuring this deal. And we go ahead and we put the deal in motion. We form a syndicate. We raise the money and put the money to work. And it was all predicated on growing the sales team and developing the product to go to market. So along the line, and then I should back up. My buddy takes a board seat. So it's the two co-founders, my friend from college, the three amigos are on the board together. So they go through, we do the deal, the money goes. There's updates sporadically, which aren't nearly as detailed as everyone wanted, and they start to struggle. And I said, we're not getting we're not getting the detailed updates that everyone would want if an investment is going sideways. So we're saying to ourselves, all right, well, what's going on? Because I'm not the only other investor. There's probably 12 or 15 of us under the hood. And we're desperate to try and get some information. We're not getting any information. Cracks to begin to fall. My buddy's a board member. We're leaning on my buddy. He's not giving us the info. The CEO is not telling him any of the info that's pertinent in a timely fashion. And we start to spin our wheels. And it starts to go sideways. And the more and more delay we get in this information gathering, the harder it becomes for this relationship. And my buddy, who's on the board, he's also friends with the CEO, and he's desperately trying to hang on. But at the end of the day, we all know we need to fire the CEO. And he won't do it. And we're struggling to try and force him to do it. We're not in a position from the deal to be able to pull that trigger. So in hindsight, he doesn't fire the CEO. The company folds. Everyone loses everything. Not a great outcome by any means of the imagination. But in lessons learned, there's a couple big lessons you learn. One, like Chip said, do more diligence than you think and don't just trust your buddy. We did diligence, but clearly not enough. The founder didn't vet us. We didn't really vet him. We trusted my buddy. He was very bright, talented, but not in a position to take a company from A to B to C. So failed there. The lack of transparency and communication was detrimental to this deal. For all you entrepreneurs and founders out there, be maniacal about communication with your investors. You get good news. Everyone likes to share good news. Bad news, share it early and often. If you haven't slept in 2 nights because you got something bad hanging over your head, call your investors. At Friday at 3 o'clock, call them. Saturday morning, call them, text them, email them. Get out in front of it, because if you wait for a board meeting 3 months later, it's usually too late, and then you're going to scramble and try and swim upstream to fix the issue you could have addressed if it was addressed in a timely fashion. That's a really important one to me. We talk about it at Squadra all the time. Communication, transparency, just everyone on board together. And ultimately, it wasn't, in hindsight, we shouldn't have done the deal clearly because I'm not a software tech investor, right? But I thought the deal was good. But the founder shouldn't have taken our money. He took our money because he's buddies with the guy and I'm his buddy, and it wasn't a strategic fit. If you're raising money, don't take the first check that comes across your desk. You got to think strategically about, will this partner, will this money, will these investors help me grow the company outside just stroking a check? Because if you find that partner at the early level, you can really grow and lean on those relationships going forward, and they'll help you be successful. What else? And then have a strategy for all these financing rounds, right? You don't want to just wing it from pre-seed to IPO every single moment in raising capital from venture firms, and then when they grow PE shops, have a strategy about executing what that dollar amount will do for your company going forward. It's not rocket science, but I found it was important to us. But yeah, so lessons learned from me. That's a bit. I'm around later if anyone wants to chat, and thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, John. So the key thing that I always like to reiterate here, having personally been on both on the entrepreneur side as a venture-backed founder, and then now also on the investor side, is this: it really is that companies understanding and getting to know their VCs because of the relationship that's going to go into that. And so one thing I always like to encourage people: if you're thinking about raising money or taking money from anyone, whether that's a bank, let alone a venture capitalist who wants to see those dollars increase, You need to talk to someone who, like, as an example, if you're going to buy a car, you're going to ask somebody else who has that car if they like the car, right? What's the pros, what's the cons, what it's like driving it after 100,000 miles. Same thing. You want to actually talk to someone who's worked with them before and has relationships. So if you haven't talked to a founder that's received investor in dollars from someone you're thinking about even getting into a relationship with, even early on, you need to hold the brakes until you find someone. If they're not willing to give you a recommendation, you probably have your answer right there. And with that, I'll get off that one. We can always talk about that later. I'd love to invite LaShawna Jones to the stage. She's the founder of The Sporty Dog. And we're going to shift gears for a second back onto a journey of getting started as well.
Thank you very much. All right. Hi, I'm LaShawna Jones. Look, Mom, I finally made it. Fail Fest, right? We're talking about failures here, which, of course, when you're an entrepreneur, it's very important because there's valid lessons learned through your failures, right? So I am the co-founder of Sporty Dog Creations. We make gourmet hot dogs from scratch right here in Baltimore, Maryland. And I never thought I'd get into food. I consider myself a serial entrepreneur, right? So for the past 10 years, I've started like 5 businesses. I was a podcaster. I had my first online magazine covering high school sports. I consider myself a media mogul, and so I started an online magazine, which went on for a few years. I ended up even trying to do a nonprofit. That didn't work. And then finally, Sporty Dog Creations in 2017. Founded it with my daughter. And so the idea behind it was to make hot dogs from scratch, right? So that we know what's in it. You guys know what's in it. It's transparency. It's real food. And so when we started that, let me back up a little bit. When I started my first business back in 2007, I had, as a serial entrepreneur, you jump into things, right? It's like, okay, I have this great idea. I know it's going to work. I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And that's what I did. I started that in 2007 and failed tremendously because I didn't know the industry, right? It was an idea. It was a great idea, but I didn't know the industry. I didn't know people in the industry. I wasn't very knowledgeable about it. I had a background in sports, I consider myself a competitor because I went to high school. My dad even was on the practice team of the Baltimore Colts in the 1970s. So I figured I'd be, at least by the time I graduate, I'd be the first woman of the NFL. But, knees are bad in my family, so that went out the window real quick. But, I felt like ideas came to me all the time, and I was great at getting them started. I was great at moving them forward. I was great at, building a story because of my media background and having a BA in communications. So I figured that, I'm good with these things. I can start this business and it'll catch on. But again, those are challenges as a woman founder and a minority founder. It's hard if you're not in the right places. So, went from that, went to a podcast in 2010. That went on for a few years. Didn't work out. Started my nonprofit because I was doing community work. And I felt, the level of engagement there. I was going to give back to youth, and I was doing some great things there, but that didn't work. And then finally in 2017, started Sporty Dog Creations. And you know what I did different with Sporty Dog Creations? I actually decided to learn about the industry, right? Put out a product that I got tested. I even hired a consultant who would come up with a great recipe for us. So that's what I did different than I did in any of all of the other businesses that I started. So when I started Sporty Dog Creations, we had a solid recipe. We were one of the first to do a vegan dog in the Baltimore area. Nobody was doing vegan hot dogs. We did a vegan hot dog because we felt where we were going in the farmer's market near Micah that there were people there who were conscious about what they wanted to eat, right? A lot of non-meat eaters. That was becoming the trendy thing. So we said, let's do a vegan dog. Beef dog, vegan dog. And what happened was we became more known for our vegan dog than our beef dog because nobody had it. So that was the way for us to be able to, so we worked with that. We massaged that vegan dog. We pushed it. And, you know, even now, our vegan dog sells just as much, if not more, than our other products, our chicken and our beef dog. So lessons was learned in that, and me just jumping out there, you know, into an industry that I don't know, although I think I have a great idea and I'm pretty savvy at it, then doing the work prior to make sure that I have the connections, I have the resources, I'm knowledgeable of what it is that I'm getting into so that, you know, people can believe it, you know, in us and in our product. So that's what we did a little bit differently in 2017 when we started Sporty Dog Creations. So now, you know, we're a thriving business. We're doing well. We're doing things a little differently, and we're doing things a little uniquely. And I think that's kind of what set us apart. In addition to, you know, finding out more about the food industry, because again, that was something that, you know, I thought I was going to be an NFL player. I never would have thought I'd been into food. So, yeah, that's my take. I'll be hanging around a little bit later if you want to learn a little bit more about Sporty Dog Creations and how we got to where we are. And thank you very much.
All right, so another point that I was thinking as a reflection on the last session, if you're here for the reporters panel, is this whole thread of like a lot of other cities think about this space. They would call it tech. Maybe they talk about entrepreneurship, but it's always about tech. I really love this week and what all the rest is to come, because what we think about here in Baltimore is a little bit different. We call it innovation, right? And so I love seeing the stories that some of them have to do with tech, and a lot of them don't. It's the lesson that comes throughout the story of how you're changing, how you're thinking over time. And so with that, to close us out, I'd like to invite Ann Balduzzi to the stage, who is currently at TEDCO, but has been many, many other things over the years since that. So giving you the mic.
Great. Thanks. It's great to see a lot of friendly faces in the audience. Most of you, I think, know me, but for those of you who don't, again, my name is Ann Balduzzi. I am currently the managing director at TEDCO's Entrepreneur and Ecosystem Empowerment. So, and the reason I came to TEDCO is because I literally stepped on almost every landmine you can step on as an entrepreneur. So I'll go back to that story now. What happened was I thought I was really prepped and prepared to be an entrepreneur. I was one of the first employees at AOL back in the early days, but it wasn't even called AOL yet. So I had worked at a really successful startup. I worked under Steve Case, who's one of the billionaire startups of the day. Learned a ton from him. Then went to Apple. Lived in Silicon Valley. Was a product manager out there. Developed and launched Apple's first online service, and then began mentoring and consulting to a wide range of startups. So I thought, I see how this is done. I think I can do this, but I didn't really have the courage yet to do it. Instead, I just kept coming up with ideas after ideas. And the more ideas I came up with, I kept seeing those ideas being taken and implemented by other people. And what I quickly realized is that ideas are easy, but implementing ideas is really, really hard. So I found an idea that I really was very passionate about, and said, okay, I'm going to build this company. And the company was called Same Grain. It still exists today, by the way. And I founded it. It was using artificial intelligence or machine learning matching algorithms to match people on literally millions and millions of attributes. So it was a pretty cool thing back in the day. It was this is 2012, 2013 timeframe, so AI wasn't quite cool yet. In fact, we were sort of ahead of our window of opportunity. But what I noticed was the more and more opportunities we had to go pitch investors, the investors kept telling us either they didn't understand the idea, so we weren't communicating it properly, or we were not investment ready. And we kept hearing over and over, you're not investment ready. And I had pulled together, by the way, a top team of co-founders. We had some real top technical talent. We were doing, some amazing, growth with the minimum viable product, but we still didn't have the traction needed to attract investors. So what I was learning at that time is what I thought was like, walking from this end of the building to that end of the building. And by the way, our offices were in this building back in that time. I thought that's the length that you had to go to get investment ready. But what I didn't realize is you literally have to go from here to California to be investment ready. So every time I thought we were investment ready, we still weren't investment ready. And so we kept trying to build traction, but we were really wasting time working on our pitch deck, which you still should do. But we kept developing version after version after version and just trying to find anybody that would listen to our story, and we would pitch them. We pitched dozens and dozens and dozens of investors from here all the way to California. I will say that California is a little more flexible in investing early on. East Coast investing, you want to make sure that you're mitigating the risk for the investor. And we didn't quite understand that part early on. We got better at it. Every time we failed with an investor, we learned a lot from that pitch. We learned that we, didn't have the storytelling skills that we should have had in unraveling a very complex idea. And when you're dealing with any kind of complex innovation, you've got to make it easy for people to understand it. And that was hard to do with AI back then. So we were rambling on. About the features. The investors didn't care about the features. They wanted to hear about the business model. And we really hadn't fine-tuned the business model down yet. We also hadn't, even though we eventually got up to 90,000 users on the platform, early in the traction days, we hadn't done, really built up enough of that user traction. We had some partnerships, but again, needed to build more on that front. So eventually, the good news is we did raise over $2 million in funding. But to stay alive during that path, we entered competitions to get money, which we won a few of those, so that helped out. We went after some early grant funding from TEDCO, which was nice. TEDCO was actually our first investor, so that opened the door to additional investors. But that was one of those things where you just kept learning that hard lesson every single time. And we should have spent more time just focusing on building the business and getting that business model and generating revenue. Revenue is the best traction you can generate because that shows somebody's really willing to pay for what you're developing. But along that path, the other thing I learned is perseverance. You have to be able to persevere because a lot of people you're going to be pitching and they're going to tell you your baby's ugly. I got told I was ugly. Yeah, I got the founder 50, by the way. So it was one of those things that you never knew what to expect an investor telling you, but you just had to stay strong throughout it. Stay to your story, build up your traction, keep building your traction, and getting your story out there. And by the way, every dime of that $2 million that we raised came from networking. And so the fact that you all are here networking today is a really good show of success for your future of your companies. But that networking is where we met people. And it's through the people we met that we met other people, introduced to other people, introduced to other people that liked our story and eventually introduced us to the investor. So that was nice. We did have one investor write us a check on the spot. That never happens, by the way. That was extremely rare that it did happen to us. But yeah, that's, perseverance, and also remember that investors invest in lines and not dots. So every interaction you have with an investor, that's a dot. Some of the more successful entrepreneurs I see today are sending out newsletters and sending updates on what they're developing and what they're building and showing the traction over time. They're taking investors out to coffee to make sure that they even invest in their vertical or in their area. They're actually learning learning more about the investor. We didn't do enough due diligence on the investors that we pitched, and so we spun our wheels, wasting time talking to investors that weren't even investing in our area, weren't even investing in our geography. So make sure you do your homework first before you go out and start talking to investors, and make sure you're investment ready. And until you're investment ready, just keep building that traction and focus on that traction as you keep going. But I stepped on a lot of landmines, even many more than that. So if anybody wants to hear more stories, feel free to grab me afterwards. Thanks.
All right, pretty great. Pretty good lessons. People learned something. Anybody on this Monday? Couple head nods. Okay, all right. People online learned something. All right. Well, that was our group of people who I greatly appreciate you sharing your stories and your failures. So another round of applause for our speakers today. And so as a point, as you learn things yourself, I hope this illustrates that I know in our description we talked really a lot about this like massive failure, right? Like some failures are massive, some failures feel massive, and some failures affect you massively. And so regardless of where you are in whatever stage in your company or your career that you're at, remember to think about them in each of those places, because that's where the learning, the changing, the growing, and eventually the winning are going to come from. And so with that, I'd like to invite our speakers are going to hang around. We are going to kind of distribute ourselves around, I think, the sort of networking area so that people have an opportunity to do Q&A. Feel free to join as a question. I think that, one other thing, Deb is going to give us a quick thing too. Nope.
I don't think I need the microphone, but no. Okay. We will be effectively shutting down at 5 o'clock, and so there is an off-site networking if you care to do that, but we're kicking you out at 5 o'clock so we can clean up and make sure we're okay for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. But thank you all for coming. It's just been really terrific today. I really appreciate it.
So, given that it is 4:08, so we don't have to bounce just yet. So I will ask our speakers to join me on stage for a quick pick, and then we'll be out in the networking area. So, and we'll open the beer cooler. Let's do it. Thank you all again for being here.